Well, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Jim Lichtenberg and my wife Rana in pink. And I moved down to Durham about 8 months ago after 35 years in New York City together and then 5 years in the Hudson Valley. And our goal was to become part of the early admission program here at the Forest. As long as you live in the area, the way this program works is, as long as you live in the area and are less than 81 years old, just made it, and pass the physical and psychological tests, you can become part of the EAP group, as it's called, and are essentially equivalent to TFAD residents, except we don't have a bedroom. But yeah, not here, good point. We are excited to have already reserved our apartment at the Terraces, which is what we're looking forward to, in 2025 in the spring when it'll be ready. And until then, we are taking full advantage of all that this wonderful establishment has to offer. It's really a pleasure to see some of our new friends here today, and also to have the opportunity to make all of your acquaintances through poetry. What I'd like to do this afternoon is, first of all, give you a brief intro about me and how I approach poetry, which I think is important to understand, and then read about a dozen poems, most of them written since we moved down to Durham. In terms of my background, as an undergraduate, I had the opportunity to study with some wonderful poets, Robert Lowell and also Archibald MacLeish, with whom I studied Emily Dickinson. I have to confess that over the past 50 years, my muse has come and gone many times. But about 10 years ago, she said, okay, I'm yours. I'm here. And I've been writing quite seriously since then. Over the past 5 years, I was published regularly in the Hudson Valley journal called Chronogram. It's actually a beautiful Life magazine. You all know what Life magazine was. Size journal. And they had a whole poetry section, so it was terrific. Now, I admit poetry is an acquired taste, and I'm just thrilled to see all of you here because I can't say that everybody knows about poetry. As the philosopher Hannah Arendt has observed, pointing to the ancient Greek poets Homer and Hesiod, poetry is actually the mother of philosophy. Why is poetry the mother of philosophy? Because from poetry, philosophy acquired the gift of making what is invisible visible. So what does that mean? How do you make something invisible visible? Well, let's take an idea, hope. So hope is like an idea or a feeling, but it's not, you can't grasp hope. I mean, it's not a visible thing. And yet, listen to what Emily Dickinson did with the idea of hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the song without the words and never stops at all. So, okay, sounds sort of like a bird. I mean, it has feathers, it perches, it sings, but it never stops singing. And okay, maybe there's not a clear image of what hope is physically, but all of a sudden you have a tangible sense of hope as a picture in your mind, and I'm sure in each of your minds it will be a slightly different picture because you'll make different things out of those words. But in the way that the poets made feelings visible in that way, philosophy then tackled invisible things like justice and honor and the good life and things like that, which aren't visible, but through philosophy you can grasp them in whole new ways. So today I think it's only appropriate that I begin with a poem about a bird, since hope is the thing with feathers. So you can now sit back, relax, put down your tray tables, have a drink, laugh, frown, whatever you would like, and enjoy the flight. If you have a thought or a question, we can take a few minutes, I'm sure, at the end to exchange ideas. Or really, if it's just driving you crazy, I wouldn't want that. So feel free to interrupt me. I don't mind. The Red-Tailed Hawk. Red sugar maples glow resplendent among the hills dark pines. Aspen trees climb the mountains, their gold-leafed branches quivering in the wind. Even while foraging, do bees, birds, butterflies enjoy these glowing colors? Do crows laugh, hopping tree to tree, or eagles riding the thermals survey the mountainsides grinning? At 10, I knew a deep country boy who kept a red-tailed hawk. Wondrous, its sharp beak, its fierce bright eye, bred for flight, caged. For years, I dreamed of feeling its talons around my arms, feeding it from my fingers. But despite my adoration, even in this fantasy, his will, his determination proved too strong. Standing in the woods, I would have unlatched the cage, watching release fill his startled body, wings unfurling like a curtain rising. He would soar off above the treetops. I would have let him go. Along with poetry, music is a real fondness of mine, so this is a poem about music. Handel's music glides grandly as a royal barge down the Thames. Banners flying, people waving from the banks. How can it be that this bouquet of notes from pipes of wood and brass captures the majesty and sway of a kingly vessel? Mere vibrations of air lodging gently in our ears, soft or loud, dulcet or energetic, tell our heart stories that have no words, need no words. And here upon this little speck of rock and water, in an ocean of time and space too vast for us even to make sense of, we name the stars with ancient stories that have no meaning to the stars themselves, revealing our longing for a divine presence to ease our enormous aloneness. I believe that music fools us, cajoles us into believing if sounds can be so loving, so consoling, how can we be so desperately alone in this deep and unfathomable moonlit night? Well, here's another poem about an animal, but it's not a bird. The fox. You'll hear a little autobiography and biography in this one. The fox. We no longer kill animals for our own adornment. My mother had a fox fur, its mouth made into a clasp. Worn on special occasions, she looked elegant in her long gloves and veiled hat. I was fascinated by its mouth, clasping its own tail. Was it really alive? Ran in the woods? Hid in bushes behind rocks? They made a fine couple, Mom and Dad, dressed in their square dance garb. He in Mexican bolero jacket with the eagle embroidered on the back, holding the snake. She in wide, brightly colored skirts which flashed when she twirled. My father's first fiancée left him at the altar to become another man's bride. And for this, my sister and I are eternally grateful. But then Dad himself was born still, but at least he was born. On the Shiva evening, a guest happened to see his little white coverlet move. In the end, the fox was not so lucky, but Mom really did look good in him. Well, I don't know how many of you have a feeling about inanimate objects. My feeling of them is that they're not nearly as inanimate as they claim to be. They do what they're going to do. They disappear, they return, whatever. So this poem, could be a song, I guess, is called Socks. I give 4 possibilities of what might have happened to the other sock. A sock has wandered off. Its mate, patient, waits by the laundry basket. She knows he'll come back, always does, with a little gift, contrite and loving at once. Second one. Or maybe it is a she who has wandered off, needs her freedom, dancing among the glitterati, and he's not jealous. When she returns, coy and tender. The first weeks are dreamy. To him it feels like a second honeymoon. Okay, third possibility. Or he's gorgeous, a Greek god, but wounded, vain, craving affirmation, while his other he is steady, makes the money. Finally, the god returns, all charming and chatty, to arms that are warm and thick. Whatever divine time he can have, he takes. Finally, 4. Or she is driven, a world changer, a whirlwind among women. Their banners are glorious, while the other she is content to wait in her shadow, to be her wing woman. Bed is not important, just tenderness. Animate or inanimate, diaphane or adiaphane, returning though the socks all fold together. I'm sorry our pup Chloe isn't here today. She likes poetry, and she also likes being taken for a nice long walk in the morning, and I find those walks really terrific. They're very relaxing. Your mind just drifts off into its own place. It's kind of like fishing, I guess, for those who like fishing. So this is called Squirrel Song. When Chloe sees a squirrel, you can imagine she almost pulls your arm off, but that's another story. And she's not responsible for what happens here, so I believe I need to say that. Dead squirrel lying on the woodland floor, chased by a dog and is no more. Where squirrel souls go, I cannot say. We watched him running just the other day. In the rain and sun, now gently dissolving like winter slowly turns to spring, robins and sparrows around him hopping, nesting, busy as anything. Frisky squirrel, did you savor your run? Scampering up trunks in the early sun, hiding your treasures in a woody keep. I wish you peace in your endless sleep. As we wander, we squander our time. We think in prose, but dream in rhyme. Dreams embroidered in exotic words, like the morning caroling of the hidden birds. Well, of the poems that I've written recently, I mean, really in the last couple of years, the next poem is the poem I worked the most on because it began with only 2 words. And I was really attracted to this thing that I'm going to tell you about. But how could I write a poem about it? It was amazing. But here we go. It's called Trench Boxes. I don't know if any of you know what trench boxes are. But it doesn't matter. You will know shortly. Trench boxes. A muddy field of Jurassic robots, bulldozers, steam shovels, backhoes growl and bite through terra firma, preparing the foundation of a building now emerging from the white lines on the blueprints. It's dangerous work, the young man in hard hat smiles, cheeks and eyes gleaming. Around him, beside deep, fresh trenches, lie concrete pipes so large I could walk through them. He is protected by huge metal-sided trench boxes, steel-sided metal crates lowered to keep the earthen walls, newly carved, from collapsing in. The more we travel the path of time, the more we need that equivalent, trench safety. No rush to be posthumous. Chasing the promises of money, love, family, we build our boxes hopefully. And when fate's mudslide comes, and it will, we trust in their prowess to let the waves of soil slide safely past. Beneath the swinging crane, this building will one day be accomplished. One day customers will come for coffee, clothing, foodstuffs, while upstairs children will run down the hallways to their doors where pets and toys await. It's dangerous work, this living, so that young eyes keep their gleam, and the earth stays calm, whatever tremors may portend.
We had a trench box in use down on the southeast corner of the construction.
Oh, how fabulous. Well, the first time I saw it in the street, I had no idea what it was. It was like this gigantic crate. And I thought, what in the world?
The problem here was they had to put a trench through dirt that they had dug out and piled up, so it was soft and easily collapsed.
Oh, my, yeah. So they stuck it down in there. Yeah, how fabulous. Well, we can't wait till they're finished because then they'll start our building. But that's another question. Thank you for that. That was great. So this is quite a change of pace here. I was reading some of Hannah Arendt, and there was a phrase that she wrote that struck me really interesting, that we think in words, in silence, that we hear in our own minds. So this is called the oral gods, gods that we know from our ears. The oral gods, we hear them amid the rocks of the bubbling stream, singing on Mount Olympus, in the snow-torn nor'easters. We hear them in the throat of the volcano, in the rush of bat-haunted caves. Vision, all we see, is a proximate confluence, an approximation, merely a sui generis construction in each individual mind. Yes, that's a dog, a tree, a lake, and we affirm it among each other. But the sigh of the mourning dove, crash of breaking waves, a snake's hiss, a forest dark lupine howl, no vision can be so perfect as the divinity of such music sinking into our hearts. The oral gods, we have always known them. From the very first life glimmers, a womb-bound child, sightless, already hears the footsteps of its mother's heart. This one is called Regret and Fantasy. Papering over regret with fantasy, I step out into the morning sun. Cool but pleasant the air. High above, screeching cranes swing concrete walls and long lumber, constructing the blooming city. When I lived in Rome, they told me this world would last 2,000 years, but no longer. Mille, ma non 2000. And from Plato's cave, we see that human nature's barely changed along the stumbling path of 2 millennia. For here we stand, yet again, sipping catastrophe with our morning coffee. Yet, in this golden, blue, and cloudless morning, plants flower, birds call. Nor are they the only thing with feathers, humming wordlessly. Hope steals into my heart. As an undergraduate, I thought I was going to be a biochemist, and to be a scientist, you had to have 2 languages. So I knew French, but I decided, okay, I'll take German. And in the course of which I fell completely in love with German lyric poetry, including this one modern German poet that you may have heard of, Paul Celan. He lost his whole family during the Holocaust, and he was the first modern poet, and it's amazing that he spoke German and was essentially culturally German, although he wasn't from Germany. He was the first poet to wrap his arms around the problem of how can we even do art, write poetry in a post-Holocaust world after what has happened. And he wrote some wonderful, wonderful poems. There's one called Black Milk, where he talks, that was his breakthrough poem. And if any of you are interested. It's just a beautiful poem. So this poem was inspired. Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, the publishers, just put out two beautiful complete works, in 2 volumes of his poetry. So I was reading it and then had the rhythms in my head, and this inspired this particular poem called Waltz. When the sky is moving, the earth trembling, the sun an exhausted star exploding out of its own core, burning its planets to cinder, an ecstasy of pure extinction, worlds engulfed and gone, swallowed beyond the event horizon. Yet in tiniest messages we live on, though sucked into the deepest cosmic well, lost and not lost, and yet so lost in time's immensity, we are a fleeting spark who will never see what cosmically will befall. The past, we strive to outrun it, but human nature trips us up, and we choke on the same whirlwind. Gun, bullet, death, gun, death, gun, bullet. Shed your grace on us, America, locked in amber waves, our national unstrung dance of death, a waltz. Well, this poem takes us back to philosophy. It's sort of a little brighter than that last one. I know, what a time we're living in. But then human beings always seem to have been living in a time, so this is ours. Thinkers must wait. Thinking itself is helpless against the arguments of common sense, says the philosopher. Thinkers must hold their tongues and not distract folks busy with their daily business. Do ants, in their manifold urbanity, think? Hive-minding across the forest floors, they scale trunks, chewing leaves to please their queen, her royal antness, source and mistress of all life. Do philosophers think about ants thinking, or attribute their communal sense to something else? Dogs instantly give up their lives to protect those to whom they are loyal, though perhaps they've thought it through already and wait to serve should that dread moment arise. We may choose to speak our thoughts out loud, but when we think in perfect silence. Who is that talking, I wonder? Am I not just talking to me? The self that thinks to itself is everyone. You see them crossing the street against the light, hurrying, thought-enveloped, to the workplace. Yet thinking itself is helpless. No legs, no jaws. No wonder the statue sits in Paris with its chin on its fist. But Wiley, the gray-eyed, gliding owl in the winter's dark amidst snow-laden boughs, chooses its spot and dives, silent as a thought, to claim its supper. Well, I had a sort of bumpy undergraduate life, but it worked out. And the day I got my diploma, someone took a picture of me receiving it from the master of Kirkland House, which is the house I lived in as an undergraduate. And it's called A Welcome Conclusion. So this is me looking at the picture. He shook my hand warmly, looked me in the eye, and in that moment, though I was but one among hundreds, and our paths had crossed at most, mostly indirectly, he projected a restrained avuncular pride, reflecting more about me than I had ever imagined. How, despite much sophomoric turmoil, I had overcome my obstacles, embraced the challenges of academia and maturity, and reached this day. There I stood in the photo, tall, happy, mortar on my head, instinctively returning Master Taylor's trim smile, my diploma in one hand, his handshake in the other, the world in front of me, in fact, journeying the very next night above the dark Atlantic with the world, well, Europe at least, all new, all amazing, all to be discovered. It has taken 50 years for me to realize his calm, steady pleasure at mine and so many others' achievements, that it was his fine calling to shepherd to a welcome conclusion without our ever being aware. And now a short poem. Sparrows, birds must be a big thing here. A flock of feeding sparrows flew up into a tree, each one choosing its own branch. One turned to look at me. We may wonder what they think to find us in their sight, we hapless, featherless bipeds without the grace of flight. Well, since it's just about to be 5 o'clock, I think it's only appropriate that I end with the first poem that I wrote in Durham. It's called Cranes. The cranes are flying, wheeling, screeching above the city, their long gracile wings counterweighted by huge concrete plinths pivot atop slender mirroring towers against the open sky. Colors flying, all day the great wing swings, ferrying pallets of lumber, wallboard, buckets of bolts, as nests of urban growth are woven from the threads it daily delivers. In ancient myths, cranes signify longevity, luck, well-being. When a crane speaks, tsuru no hitokoe, the Japanese say, it has the voice of authority. Dream of a crane in China, and good fortune will follow. Resurrected by these single-winged creatures sailing 100 feet above in the air, our old city newly folds itself back into good fortune, back into the origami of history. To honor them, the cranes, we look skywards, craning our own necks in admiration of their majestic architectonic gifts. Thank you very much.